The last time the Global GT Series visited Britain back in May, the Harrods McLaren of Andy Wallace and Olivier Griard won at Silverstone, and I was enviously watching from the pit lane. When the circus returned last month to Brands Hatch, two things had changed. The new Porsche 911 GT1 that had won the GT class at Le Mans was on pole position, and I was right behind it on the grid in the Newcastle United Lister Storm. At least in spirit, as my co-driver Jeff Lees was actually in the car for the first stint. Between us on the grid, the Gulf McLaren of championship leader James Weaver.
We're obviously going out to win. A good result here will put us, hopefully, pretty much out of reach as far as the championship's concerned. But it's very important for us to score points. So the strategy is to try and win. If we're not winning, we're not going to throw our toys out the pram. We're going to make sure we score some points.
A win wouldn't come easily, though, as the Porsche had been over a second faster in practice, but at least it wasn't eligible to score points. The arrogant Germans were just there to go testing.
No, it's not arrogant. I think it shows that Porsche is doing a consequent development and not go testing somewhere where sun is shining. We test under competition circumstances. I think this shows how clever Porsche is.
Creeping round clearways for the rolling start of the 4-hour race, Jeff Lees had the Lister tucked up behind Hans Stuck in the Porsche. Our team strategy was simple. So all you got to do, Jeff, is to get right up that little Porsche's bumper going up the paddock and just stay there. In the event, it was James Weaver on the outside that powered past the Porsche round paddock into the lead. Jeff then got a little sideways on his cold tyres, and that gave those following the idea they could squeeze by, but they couldn't. John Nielsen, the East McLaren, clips the Lister and spins round, clouting Anders Olofsson in the sole Ferrari F40. The net result, Weaver and Stuck away in the lead. Then a gap to Lees, running third in the Lister, while Nielsen and Olofsson gather themselves together with a lot of ground to make up. But James Weaver's dash for glory ahead of Hans Stuck wasn't a true reflection of their relative pace.
I think Hans was a bit generous going into paddock. I got rolling a bit quicker than he did, and I left him plenty of room at paddock. I didn't really take an apex because I wasn't quite sure where he was, but he just let me go. So he let me lead the first lap, and then he overtook and disappeared into the distance.
And that was the end of the challenge to the Porsche GT1 steamroller, barring breakdowns, of course. But it had raced for 24 hours at Le Mans without too much bother, so none of us were very hopeful. Behind this pair, Jeff began reeling in the McLaren without much difficulty, helped at times by the numerous Porsche 911s in the slower GT2 class, both on and off the track. The yellow flags warning of this incident caused James a minor panic. You mustn't overtake after a yellow flag before passing the next green. It all helped close up the battle for the best of the rest. Gulf McLaren, Newcastle United Lister, Harrods McLaren, and then the Lotus. Andy Wallace in the yellow Harrods car had won from 10th at Silverstone and was happy starting from 5th on the grid.
5th is obviously a lot better than 10th. Brands is harder to pass, but our pit crew are very quick. So if I could just be in contact with everybody at the end of the first hour, maybe they can elevate us up the order a little bit when we stop.
Behind Andy, Jan Lammers in the Lotus was enjoying one of his favourite circuits.
I love it. I think there's the three nicest tracks in the world. This is Suzuka, Spa and Brands Hatch.
Sharing the drive, a former champion of Brands, Chris Goodwin.
This is the first time I've driven the Lotus on a track I know, and it's massively different. And it's really helping. It's evened things out between myself and Jan. It's always fantastic to race here at Brands Hatch. And this is the first time I've done a race as long as this at Brands, so it's all really interesting stuff.
Hans Stuck was another fan of the neglected Kent circuit.
Brands is one of the last circuits not have been destroyed by any silly chicanes. It's a real demanding driver circuit. Traffic here is an issue. I mean, so many cars on the track. Sometimes you feel like being in a rush hour in downtown Munich in the morning, 8 o'clock. But that's what I have to live with, you know. And also there, it's good to see how the car works there, you know.
Running by himself, Hans seemed to sweep through the field with ease, while James had the distraction of constantly having to think of Jeff on his tail, always looking for an opening. It's maybe unfashionable to have a big engine in the front, but the Lister was giving the $1 million supercar a run for its money.
Well, the car, as I've said to you before, it's a good race car. The car setup is good. The McLaren has a a slightly better engine, so he's quicker out of the corners. So it's easy to catch the car, but to overtake him is very difficult.
With rear tyres fitted all round and a 50-50 weight distribution, the Lister is a well-balanced chassis, lacking only in power and traction, but it is good on the brakes, and Jeff revelled in monstering the McLaren ahead of him. Jan Lammers, though, was having no such fun in his Lotus and was soon headed for the garage.
Well, we had a voltage drop problem. We hope we've cured it, but I think for the race it looks real tough, so we might as well make sure that Chris gets as much laps in as possible.
So Chris got his chance, but it turned out to be shorter than his first ever club race. After a couple of attempts to cure the problem, the struggle was abandoned. As the first hour wore on, the McLaren and Lister were tied together, except when the TVR Cerberus came between them. But the traffic wasn't enough to let the McLaren get away. Jeff really was having fun.
Well, exciting. I was quite enjoying following the golf car. I like harassing cars. I was enjoying that, to be truthful.
James and the McLaren, however, didn't really appreciate Jeff's attentions.
That list is a real problem for us because it's very, very quick. Jeff Lees was all over me for the first hour. It's going to be tight at the end.
James and Jeff circulated as one for that first stint. On a single lap, they disposed of 4 rival British mates in succession. The GT2 Marcus of Court Oyster at Westfield. The Morgan, with Bill Wickham on board, into paddock. Then the second Works Lotus of Alex Portman up at Druids. And finally, the XJ220 Jaguar of Wyn Percy at Surtees. Everyone reckons the McLaren is the ultimate supercar. For the Lister to pester it like a terrier was something of a revelation, although Jeff couldn't quite squeeze past. Our plan, like all good Grand Prix scripts, was to leapfrog ahead by not spending 30 seconds with a tyre change when we refuelled. But when it came to the driver change, Jeff got a bit stuck getting out. And then I couldn't find the shoulder strap, having got in.
Where is it? Wrong one, it's coming longer!
And then, just when I was ready to go, a Porsche blocked my path. Having been pushed back, I then made it worse by stalling it. Sometimes. Finally, I was on my way, careful to observe the speed limit and checking my cold air pipe was connected. But would the McLaren change tyres? And if it did, would we get ahead of it? The boss wasn't impressed with the stop, but he was happy with the speed.
You see from the results, we're second fastest lap, just a tenth off the Porsche. I think Weaver was holding him up for quite a lot of that lap, but it's going very well. No problems reported, and so if it stays like that.
The Gulf crew stopped, changed driver, refuelled, changed tyres, and got out 7 seconds ahead of us. Despite the older rubber, I was determined to continue Jeff's good work, but I had one of those days when the traffic seemed to be working against me. Go on, go past or get over. Behind the top 3, the 2 Dave Price cars were next up. John Nielsen had recovered from the spin, so that Thomas Bichère was in 5th spot, while the Harrods car was 4th after an unhappy hour for Andy Wallace.
It's got no grip whatsoever. It's just gone. The car's just sliding everywhere. I can't do anything with it. Maybe we need to go onto a harder tyre or something, but we'll have to discuss that now.
No such worries for the Porsche, though. Hans Stuck had a comfortable 45 seconds lead when Thierry Boutsen took over. No need even to change the tyres. They were on a cruise.
We have a very strong engine. We have a lot of torque on our engine. These cars are, for us, easier to overtake on acceleration than on braking or turning into corners. It's very tight. It's got many corners, so it's not an easy place to overtake.
Now I'm glad you said that, Thierry, because even when the door looks open, it can still slam in your face. Steady on now, Tiff. I know you want to catch Ray Belm in that McLaren, but we were running third in Germany and second in Japan before mechanical failures stopped us. This time, we want to take that podium finish. We're a solid third here, and there's still over 2 hours to run. He's got new tyres, you haven't. Pace yourself. Take it easy. With the halfway mark approaching, it was soon time to hand back to Jeff, but I wasn't having a good day in the pit lane. Well, it's not always easy to see your pit in the heat of the moment. The leading Porsche and the chasing McLaren, though, both had faultless stops, which dropped us even further back. But when Jeff returned, we still held a healthy third ahead of a trio of chasing McLarens. No one, though, could match the effortless pace of the Porsche that was about to lap us as I made my excuses to the boss. But suddenly...
I heard a noise like the exhaust was broken, maybe 2 laps before, but something must have gone wrong with the engine, like a piston. Now it's seizing up, it wouldn't pull, and the smoke coming out the back. I think it must be a cracked piston or something. End of story.
End of story for us. But who else might stumble before the end? Andy Wallace was up to third and in line for our podium place.
Obviously anything could go wrong. I don't think we can catch anybody, but then something might go wrong with them too, so I'm always optimistic of getting higher up the podium.
Trouble at Porsche, though, seemed unlikely, but there was a flutter of anxiety during their last pit stop.
We have a little problem with the engine. Sometimes you see some long flames coming out of the exhaust. It's similar to Le Mans when we had a problem with the Poti, but I think it shouldn't do it any harm, and if the car stays together, we have a reasonable chance to finish higher.
A Porsche engine failure was about as likely as a BMW engine breaking in a McLaren.
The engine blew up. There's no warning, it just let go, which is very, very unusual because the engine will run for 200,000 miles in the road car. So I don't know what's caused that.
30 minutes to go, and the Harrods McLaren is now up to second, but there was no hold in the Porsche. It may bend the rules, as it hardly conforms to the road car spirit intended by the regulations, but it's certainly an effective device. Jubilation, chez Porsche, but consternation for the East car as it runs out of petrol and loses third place to the second Gulf McLaren on the very last lap. For the Harrods boys, though, fortune smiled for once.
We are lucky, and we are. I don't know if we are first or second because the Porsche is not in the same series for me. Huh?
We really need this result. Championship-wise, we were so far behind. That's given us 30 points, and it's closed it right up. I think the championship for the rest of the year is going to be exciting.
And you can find out how it's all resolved later